I yield myself such time as I may
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise today just before Congress goes on a 5-week recess for the entire month of August and the first week of September. And during that time, we will celebrate Labor Day. Now, there's a lot of reasons to celebrate Labor Day, but it has particular context to this debate today. 100 years ago, this Labor Day, Martha died. Now, perhaps not everybody here knows about or has heard about Martha. Martha was the last passenger pigeon, died in the Cincinnati Zoo. Now, none of us remember passenger pigeons, but they were in numbers so great, billions, that they would darken the sky for hours or days as they passed. Yet, within a very short period of time, they became extinct. I believe she is stuffed and on display at the Smithsonian. I think they have a special exhibit on this. I'd recommend to people to remember the way things used to be. Now, we did then, 50 years later, pass the Endangered Species Act. So this is kind of symmetrical. 100 years ago, last passenger pigeon. 50 years later, we adopt a law to try and preserve species. And, you know, I think the most eloquent words I've ever heard on endangered species were from Justice Douglas on the Mineral King decision. This doesn't do all of his decision justice, but just one sentence. When a species is gone, it is gone forever. Nature's genetic chain, billions of years in the making, is broken for all time. Conserve water, conserve land, conserve life. And then he went on to speculate about what might be lost with any individual species, what potential it might have had. Could it cure cancer? Could it, who knows if we lose these species? So Congress, 50 years ago, in a very different time, in a very bipartisan way, passed the Endangered Species Act. Now, today we have before us yet another missed opportunity. I'm not going to look at the Endangered Species Act and say it's perfect. It isn't. I believe, 50-year-old law could use some revision. A lot has been learned, a lot of real science has changed in the interim. In particular, the individual listing of species, particularly when they occupy the same space, becomes very problematic, as opposed to taking more of an ecosystem-based approach. There are some, or modifying the whole idea of how we deal with critical habitat. But that's not before us today. It wasn't considered by the so-called working group of the committee or special group or whatever it was. They concluded that the Endangered Species Act is a failure because it hasn't recovered enough species. They did leave out a little fact that 90% of the species that are listed are recovering at the rate specified in their federal recovery plans. This doesn't happen instantaneously. Years of degradation of environment, years of over-harvesting or over-hunting or those things don't get they don't get changed in a short period of time. But 90% are on target. But they left that out probably because it didn't support their conclusion that the act just isn't working at all. So we have an estimate, actually, that without the Endangered Species Act, passed by a more enlightened Congress, bipartisan, 50 years ago, that there would be 227 species that would have gone extinct since the law's passage. They include gray wolves, although there are some trying to turn around that recovery effort, including some in this administration, green sea turtles, humpback whales, and of course, the iconic bald eagle. Without the Endangered Species Act, they, in all probability, would all be extinct. A memory for our generation, but gone. Now, as I said, it's not perfect, and I think there are changes we could make through a deliberative process in the committee, but that wouldn't be just a small group from one side of the aisle going around the country holding so-called hearings or listening sessions. I'm not sure what that alarm means, but hopefully nothing serious. We could assure greater transparency in ways that weren't considered and won't be proposed here today. We could promote better the use of best science. We could improve cooperation and coordination with the states who are committed to species protection and recovery. However, none of the legislation before us will do that. It will do nothing to improve species recovery. It'll do nothing to improve the science underlying listing decisions. Instead, actually, contravening what the Republicans espouse to wish, these bills will instead increase the amount of red tape that's involved, create more reporting requirements, divert agency resources from recovery efforts, and most oddly, and I think perhaps the oddest and most objectionable and nonsensical part of this legislation, is it will deem that any data submitted by any Native American tribe, any city, county, or state will be deemed to the best available science. Now, if you have counties, there's 16,000 counties in America. Let's say, a couple of them come to a different conclusion. Well, suddenly the agency is confronted with, we have best available science from this county, we have best available science from this county, we have best available science from this county. Wow, haven't we created an unbelievable potential for litigation over any decisions that are made given that mandate? I think we have. Of course, that may be why they go on later in the bill to limit attorneys' fees, because they're anticipating that there'll be a huge proliferation of litigation, and they want to mitigate the costs of the problem that they're going to create with this nonsensical, this is the best available science. So I think it's going to create a lot of tension potentially between states and counties and rural counties and urban counties, and because they're all vying to submit the best available science. So, here we are yet again, taking up time on the floor, and I guess we need to do that before we get to real things like the, suing the President of the United States, despite the fact courts have definitively decided we can't do that. We have political tools, and it's a non-justicable controversy, but that's not before us today. That's tomorrow, so we're trying to kill time to build up to that, that end just before we go off on recess. But I'm going to raise another topic, and it's a bit sensitive. About 12 years ago, I had massive fires burning in my district, and the Biscuit Fire, and the committee just happened to be holding a hearing on wildfire, and it devolved into the usual partisan, you go to your corner, I'll go to mine, we need to do forest health, we need to do this. And I just kind of, as sometimes I do, I expostulated a bit in the committee, and I won't use my entire 5 minutes to say how wrong I thought this was, and that I thought fires were very bipartisan in their destruction, and we should cut it out. Well, a few members, oddly enough, from very different perspectives came to me afterwards, and that would have been George Miller. Predictable George would side with me. But also, we had Scott McGinnis, we had John Shadegg, and ultimately we had Greg Walden involved. And we sat down and we hammered out something that ultimately didn't pass through the House, but our framework was adopted by the Senate, HIFRA, and then came back to the House and was adopted. And it was an attempt to expedite fuel reduction and prevent the intensity of future fires. I look at that as a model of how we should deal with fires. We do need to do more fuel reduction work, and we do need to do more preparation and pre-positioning, but we also have to fight the fires that are burning today. Now, there is the rarest of rare things in Washington, D.C., even rarest than the rarest endangered species, which would be a bill which is bipartisan. I guess a lot of people don't know what that means anymore. It means it's supported by both Democrats and Republicans, bicameral by both Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate in substantial numbers, and is supported by the President of the United States. Now, that is a pretty endangered thing. It's been around for quite a number of months. We have yet in the House, and it's a bill that's designed both to mitigate for future fires and to more efficiently fight fires. The agencies that are tasked with fighting fires are about to run out of money. Happens every year. Now, who cares if they run out of money? Well, they got to keep fighting the fires. All right. Well, what do? They got all their other programs, including the fuel reduction program, the forest health program, the timber program, the recreation program, things that are going to bring about more intense and more fires in the future and impact anybody who has a national forest or interior lands in their state or their area. Now, this bill has yet to have a single hearing or any consideration except for a mention in the Ryan budget which said he didn't support it. That's it. That's the total action by the House of Representatives on this issue. That's very sad, and that's what we should be here on the floor today considering. You know, there are, as of this moment, I just checked it out because it's worse every day, we have currently nationally, got to find page 1 here, but here we go, 25 major fires, 7 in Oregon. These are all uncontained, or partially uncontained. 6 in California, 4 in Washington, including the largest in the state's history, 3 in Utah, 2 in Idaho, 1 in Colorado, and phenomenal lightning storms are predicted over the next 2 days, which means many, many, many more fires. Yet Congress is going to pass, I expect the House will pass this, this ESA, so-called ESA bill today, and leave town without dealing with the firefighting issue. I think it's very sad. Now, some say, well, we've already done our job. We passed a bill, a couple of bills, number of bills that could deal with forest health, future mitigation, fuel reduction. That's true. But even if they became law today, they wouldn't deal with today's problem that the agencies are going to run out of fire. And even if they became law today, it would take many years to get there. I got some pretty good estimates. We have somewhere around 75 million acres of land at high risk of wildfire in the West. And if we use the most conservative possible estimate, one that estimates there's a lot of commercial value there that reduces thinning costs, one that assumes that there's a lot of biomass available that's economic, you could get it down, say, $300, $500 an acre. Well, that would be $20 billion to go out and do that work. We're about to spend the paltry budget for this year, $300 million for fuel reduction, on fighting current fires. So we aren't exactly getting there. And it's a real issue. And that's what we should be dealing with here today. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves